Because if you're in an underdog position and you're too humble to admit what you see in others inside you, you're going to sacrifice for them initially. And then you're going to build up unconscious resentments in order to get your life back. Where are you in relationship to your relationship? Are you the underdog? Are you the overdog? Or are you in a state of equanimity and have a fair exchange with the person that you care about and in relationship with? Sometimes people get infatuated with other people. And for whatever reason, they're infatuated with their attractiveness or infatuated with their intelligence or infatuated with their business savvy or their wealth or their social skills or how they seem to be a stable person for marriage, or maybe they're infatuated with their inspirational capacities, how inspired they are about their life. Whatever it is, it can be one or more of those 7 areas of life that you could be attracted to. And everybody, believe it or not, is looking for the best package they can get out there. But if you meet somebody that you think is a really amazing package and you're infatuated and you're kind of goo-goo-eyed and you're kind of dopamine driven and you're blind to the downsides, well, you're going to play the underdog position. And if you're in the underdog position, you're going to want to sacrifice yourself for them. Almost everybody who's been in an underdog position will start doing things they don't normally do in order to fit into the other person's life because they fear the loss of them, because they don't want to lose that which they infatuate with. Anything you infatuate, you fear the loss of. So you'll sacrifice what's important to you to keep that relationship going. Those individuals will eventually, kind of let you know that you're minimizing yourself, and they don't want that. They want somebody that's an equal. So what happens is you're sitting there afraid of telling them anything negative because you fear of losing them. They're afraid of telling you something positive for fear of misleading you, but they intuitively know that this isn't a long-term relationship. It's not quite it, but it's convenient. And so you're the underdog, they're the overdog. And whenever you're the underdog, you're looking for monogamy in one person. You think you found that one special. The one that's the overdog is keeping the options open because they know they don't really have a mate and there's somehow not respect. So they're afraid to say anything positive. You're afraid to say anything negative if you're the underdog. So this is sort of an ancestral dynamic because you're like playing this juvenile dependent and this independent, precociously independent person. One's like the adult, one's like the child. My advice, if you're going to be in a relationship, is don't go and try to get married to somebody that's bigger than you, and you think, oh my God, I better hurry up and grab them before they find out I'm a loser here. Don't play underdog like that. I assure you, you're going to eventually develop resentment. You're eventually going to say, I've done all this for you. You're eventually going to crack the fantasy who they are, because time will do that. You're going to bring them off the pedestal, and now you've been sacrificing, and now you're starting to lay out your resentments on them. And by the way, when you're the underdog, you're going to accumulate resentments until you speak up and get things back into balance. If they come into balance and they still are there, and now they respect you because you're respecting yourself, well, that's more of a healthy dynamic. But if you're sitting there playing underdog and you're wanting to come back from that, what I advise is to go and find out. The reason you're playing an underdog is because you're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you. And you're thinking they have something you don't. And the thing is, you do. As it says in Romans 2:1, whatever we judge in others, we do the same things. But we sometimes are too proud or too humble to admit what we see in them inside us. So what you do is go and identify what it is that you admire about them and make a list of those things you admire about them. Once you do, you now ask yourself, all right, self, go to a moment where and when I perceive myself displaying or demonstrating the same behavior, and go find out where you have the equivalent behavior. It may be slightly in a different form because of your values, but find out where you have that, because if you can see that you have everything that you see in them, you level the playing field. You're not sacrificing altruistically for them. You're actually standing up for yourself and having a fair exchange. When you do, there's banter. That means you can say positive and negative things and keep them in check, which is what makes them drawn to you and respect you. If you're afraid to say negative things because you're the underdog, they don't respect you because you're not respecting yourself. But if you're able to say positive and negative things and keep them in check, they are drawn to you because they finally have somebody that's keeping them authentic. And they want to be loved for who they are, and the authentic self is who they are. But if you've got them up on a pedestal, they know that's not who they are. And they're looking for somebody that's a little bit more up to keep them in check, to get them back to be who they are. People don't want to be put on pedestals or pits. They want to be put in hearts. So if you put them on a pedestal and you minimize yourself and you're the underdog, go find out what you see in them inside you. Now, I had a very interesting case many years ago. This is over 30 years ago. I was out in San Diego and I was speaking to a Mary Kay cosmetic group. There were hundreds of women at this function there. And afterwards, a lot of them wanted to do a private consult. So I had a big load of girls over the next 2 days that wanted a consult, an hour consult or 2 hour consult. And there's this one young lady that came to me and she said, Dr. Demartini, I really would love to have your feedback and advice on this. I said, all right. She says, I've met this guy and I just know he's the one. He's just amazing. And he's just everything I've ever wanted and everything else. And I just want to know what you think. Should I marry the guy? And I said, well, if you're asking the question, you're obviously not certain. And there's a part of you that's hesitating on that. So here's what my recommendation is. I want you to go sit over there in the other room over there and write down all the things you admire about this guy. And make sure it's an exhaustive list. Everything you admire about him. Go make that list. So she's okay. So she went over there and spent about 2 hours. And I did a couple other consults in the meantime. And she wrote down 2 hours worth of benefits. And there are a lot of them. I think she had like 78 benefits of this guy, things she liked about him. And she came back and brought it to me. And I said, great. Instead of doing another portion of the consult, I'm going to have to go do another project now. Now go write the same number of things you dislike about him. He says, well, I don't have that. I said, then you have a fantasy about who this guy is, and you're going to find out the hard way once you go and try to pin him down. So let's go make a list of all the things you dislike. And when the now the list that you dislike is matching the one you like, you now have a real understanding of who this person is. So go dig and come back when you're done. And make sure if you got 78 positives and I had 78 negatives about this guy. So she went there and she worked on that for about another 2 hours. She comes back and she said, wow, that was really intriguing. And I said, it was humbling, wasn't it? She goes, yeah, it was. I was blind and I didn't want to look at those. I said, why? She said, well, because my parents fought a lot and they used to yell and bitch at each other about the things they didn't like about each other. And so I was going to make sure I didn't do that. And I was only going to see the positives. And I said, well, the reason why your parents probably did that is because they probably started out the same way as you. And they eventually found out they overlooked the obvious. So right now, can you see you still have the negatives? And you saw the negatives in him. You see that they're equal. He goes, I do. I said, how are you feeling about him? She says, I still love him. I said, great. That's a healthier state than when you started here. Now I got another question. Now, this one's probably not going to take but 2 hours again. We're going to be here all day. And she goes, well, I didn't know I was going to do that. I said, well, I'm asking you to do it because you asked me a very important question. It's about marriage. You need to think this through. So now what you do is go and find out where and when you display and demonstrate all those 78 traits you like about him. And go write down where you did it, where you do it, until you can see that you do the same behaviors as him. So you're not missing something. So you're not desperately needing him. You're wanting to be with him because you're choosing to, not because you're feeling I've got to have him because you're missing something. Because desperation pays a price. And then go and find out where you have every one of those traits. So she went again. And now she's pushing herself and making sure she's doing it. And I noticed that I'm looking over at her from a distance and she's got Kleenex there because she's crying on many of them because she realized, oh my God, I got these traits. And she's calming down the infatuation with him. And of course, when she came back, she knew I was going to send her to go do I need to go do the other side? I said, quickly go do the other side now. Go find out we have those traits, the things you like and dislike. And she came back with those traits. And she found out the drawbacks of those, the benefits of those traits she disliked. And I had to ask her the drawbacks on the traits she admired until I leveled the playing field. And she finally came back, and it's about 6 o'clock at night. She spent most of the day there. And luckily, she had the time for it. And she came back, and I said, now, when you think about this guy, what are you thinking about? And she goes, I still have love for him. I said, can you see you have everything you see in him? Yes, in my own way. I have it my own way. Can you see you're now not the underdog? You're not in the underdog position. You kind of see him as an equal now? She goes, yeah, I do. I feel like I can be myself around him right now. I could speak up to him and not worried about what he feels and upsetting him. And I need that. I said, now you're now ready for it. Now I got a question. Do you even have to ask me whether or not you think it would be wise to marry him? She goes, no, he's the guy. I said, great. The reason I did this exercise, I wanted you to discover you had the power to make that decision yourself. I didn't want you to use me as that. And then if it didn't work out, if I told you, oh, great, you got a guy that's great, and then you end up having to go through the lessons and it didn't work out, then you'd blame me for that. And then you think, well, I'm now going to go out and try to find another infatuation. I wanted you to love the person for both sides. People want to be loved for both sides. You do too. She goes, I do. I said, can you see you have both sides? He has both sides and you still love him? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, that's what my intention was. So right now, you don't need to ask my opinion. You have your own opinion. Trust your own heart now. And she had tears in her eyes. She gave me a big hug and she said, thank you. That was not what I expected today, but that's what I needed today. I said, great. Because if you're in an underdog position and you're too humble to admit what you see in others inside you, you're going to sacrifice for them initially. And then you're going to build up unconscious resentments in order to get your life back. Because when you sacrifice, you take the things that are important to you and you push them aside for doing things that are important to them. And there's a necessity to be able to communicate what you want in terms of what they want, but not sacrifice. Complete sacrificing and minimizing yourself as an underdog is not going to work long term. And they're going to be looking for somebody that's a mate, that's a match. And they're probably going to end up having a fling if you don't get that in order. So I say go and find out what you see in them inside you. Go level the playing field. Go find the drawbacks of all the things you're infatuated with. Find out where they have the other side. Find the benefits of that so you can handle both the positives and negatives of both sides of them. Because there is no one-sided individual. The very trait you admire in somebody has downsides. And the very trait you have despise in somebody has upsides. If you look very carefully, that both of them are going to be guiding you and helping you as a feedback to help you become more authentic in your own life and more empowered in your life. And if you sit and minimize yourself as an underdog, the way to come back is to realize that what you see in them, you got. Nothing's missing in you. At the level of the essence of your authentic self, what the theologians call the soul, nothing's missing. It's fulfilled. It's pleromic. But at the level of the existence of your senses, things appear to be missing. The things that appear to be missing are the things you're too proud or too humble to admit that you think they have that you don't have. And as long as you're playing where I'm superior, inferior, you're going to have volatilities in the relationship, not stability. But if you can see that you have a reflection of them and whatever they have, you have in your own way and it's equal, and you can realize that they're both worth speaking up. They deserve to speak, you deserve to speak, and you have sustainable, fair exchange. It'll help you. And also find out what they value most, because that's what they're committed to. Their ontological identity revolves around their highest value. Their epistemological area of expertise that's interesting to them, that they want to go and talk about, is their highest value. Their very purpose in life is their highest value. If you can't see how their highest value is helping you fulfill yours, and you can't see how yours is helping them fulfill theirs, you're going to have an alternating monologue. You're going to be talking, they're not listening, they're speaking, you're not listening. But if you can see how what your values are is helping them with theirs, and theirs are helping you with yours, the top three, then you'll end up having a dialogue and communication. And that's one of the keys of a healthy relationship is dialogue and communication. Willing to say both positive and negative things equally, but not necessarily, derogatory in a way that just is constructive. So having the courage to be yourself and having integrity in a relationship is what you want in a relationship. So by going and owning the traits and going and linking the values, you can take your underdog position and use it to empower your life. But don't sit there and rush somebody to get married and put pressure on to be some fantasy person that you think they're going to be, and then end up sacrificing yourself for them and then eventually resenting it, and then turning around and being demanding of them and go the other extreme, because now you're going to end up with the volatilities. And by then you might have had some children and you may have created some chaos in your life from that. And if you put yourself and make sure you have a stable relationship and then have your children, they win, you win, the world wins. And not whirlwinds, but the world wins. So my advice is to not stop at the underdog position and want immediate gratification and try to manipulate somebody into getting married before you're actually in an equal footage with them. Get the thing back in order. The way you know you have it is you've got bantering, you've got a fair exchange, you feel like you're not having to sacrifice to be yourself, you're able to be yourself around them, they're able to be around you and be themselves, and they can be nice and mean and kind and cruel and positive and negative and show out all their sides, and you can still love them. If you can do that, you're on your way to having a stable relationship. So those are some tips. All those things are the things I teach in the breakthrough experience. That's why I tell people to come to the breakthrough experience each week, because these are the things I teach them. I teach them how to stabilize a relationship and how to empower themselves and how to empower each area. And by the way, when somebody wants a relationship with you, they're looking for somebody who's intelligent, that's fit, that's got some ambitions, that's got some financial resources, not going to drain them and depend on them. Somebody that's basically loves them and really wants to be with them, not a fantasy person, and then trying to get you to be that fantasy. Somebody that's socially connected and savvy, and somebody that's inspired by something. So the more areas in life you empower, the more valuable you are to other people's lives, and the more they're going to be able to endure the challenges that it takes to manage a relationship. And if you can link the values, own all the traits you see in them, realize reflective awareness, and stabilize your dynamic with them, you can have a stable relationship. That's why I tell people, come to the breakthrough experience, because I'm going to give you tools that's going to help you in not only in your relationship, but in all areas of your life.